Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. The government's decision to sack Kamla Beniwal as governor of Mizoram has created a sharp divide between those who believe the government was right and those who think it's behaved vindictively. So tonight we examine the case for the governor's dismissal, the reasons for suspicion, and the government's defense against the charge that this is revenge for Kamla Beniwal's opposition to Narendra Modi's government when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat. Tonight we promise the most comprehensive, in-depth analysis of this development so that you can judge the truth for yourself. And now joining me to discuss the sacking of Kamla Beniwal is BJP MP and General Secretary Rajiv Pratap Rudy, Congress spokesperson Abhishek Singhvi, a former member of the Gujarat government Jai Narayan Vyas, Congress Gujarat spokesperson Kamla Beniwal, a top Supreme Court lawyer Raju Ramachandran, and one of India's foremost journalists, Aarti Jarat. Jai Narayan Vyas, the government's decision to sack Kamla Beniwal has been called politically motivated. It's been called a vendetta. Before we come to details, how can you prove to the audience that this wasn't revenge for the way she clashed with Mr. Modi when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat and stalled legislation like the Gujarat Lokayukt bill?
Decision. Who takes the decision? It is definitely taken on the recommendation of the Council of Ministers. Then it goes to His Excellency the President of India. His Excellency President of India is under no obligation of the Council of Ministers to sign on the dotted line. He has every right to refer it back for reconsideration to the Council of Ministers with his observations, and even after that reference, if it is sent to him, he has every right to keep it pending under consideration. The President has cleared it. That shows that the President at the highest level constitutional authority has applied the mind, and it is not the decision of the government as it is being made out to be, or the Council of Ministers. It is a decision which in its all legality endorsed and agreed upon by the President of India. And therefore, I think to say that the government has taken any decision out of vendetta or any kind of a prejudice, I think it's out of place.
Let me, Kamla Beniwal, put an opposite question to you. Again, before we come to details, why has the Congress party jumped to the conclusion that this is a vendetta, that it is political revenge, without waiting to find out what the case against Kamla Beniwal actually is?
Karanji, there are several factors or several issues I can make out here. The first is that this government, which was earlier the Chief Minister of Gujarat's government, has a track record of taking vengeful actions, starting with Keshubai and Sanjay Joshi. I don't want to fall into that. The second thing is that Kamla ji came as a governor in Gujarat in 2009. Till 2009 there was no Lokayukt, and so there was the appointment of the Lokayukt by the Chief Justice, nomination of a particular judge, and Dr. Kamla ji gave the endorsement. That is where the whole thing started, because the 17 scams which had to be looked into, very high amount, 1,75,000 crores, and so this would come out with a box of corruption which was taking place in the Gujarat government. So this was one factor that was completely ripped open when the Lokayukt was appointed. The second issue is that the government of Gujarat went on boasting about women's safety, women's reservation, and so came up with a reservation of 50% for women reservation. And that act also was sent back because the legislation piece was coupled with another legislative piece which could not be done as per procedure. And so these are two very highlighting points. And the third point is that Dr. Kamla ji has a track record of 50 years in public life. There has not been a single allegation, and so the timing to take this vengeful action is very suspect.
All right. I heard you. I will point out to you, and I'll come to that later on in detail, that in fact Justice Ramaswamy in '97 passed strictures against her when he was a Supreme Court judge. So you cannot say there's never been a single allegation or criticism against her. But I'll come to that later on. At the moment, I want to welcome Mr. Rudy to the show. Mr. Rudy, at the moment we're discussing the broad sacking. I'll come to specific details later. If you believe you have good reasons for sacking Dr. Beniwal, why then last month did you transfer her to Mizoram? Why did you not sack her at that point? It's the fact that you transfer her to Mizoram rather than sack her and then sack her a month later that makes people suspicious that this sacking is political vendetta?
Well, I'll just take 2 to 3 minutes to explain what you have asked. But before that, I would always request, Karan, when you put panelists, at least they can be audible by speaking slowly, not being anxious in making a point, so that we can all hear and the audience can hear, so that we can respond to it. But that is a problem for you, not for me. And this is a very valid question, Karan, which you have asked. Why wasn't she, the lady governor, sacked immediately instead of being shifted to Mizoram? Now, if you know, I'll just point out 2, 3 things. First, that the government of the day has taken note of the order passed post 2004 when the NDA government was ousted and the UPA government came in. They decided to sack 4 governors, which was in Uttar Pradesh, Goa, Madhya Pradesh and one more place. Now, after that, someone went to the Supreme Court and there was a judgment which was passed that there can't be a political vendetta, and then the scope of judicial intervention was created by the ruling of the Supreme Court. But at the same time, the judicial intervention did say that the government had the right to take a call on the subject if it was convinced there was some erroneous or something which should have been considered while removal. Now, when you ask when the lady governor was not sacked, I am of the firm opinion that under the process of law and the constitutionality of the situation, it was advisable for the government to go into the facts about her. So the very fact that the government went for a considered opinion, and I'm sure when this decision has been taken, because the president acts on the advice of the cabinet under the article.
In other words, you're saying you needed more time.
If advice has gone to the if advice has gone to the president, it has to be under considered opinion by the government, which must have come from the Attorney General. Or from the,
so you're saying you needed more time?
But the government has taken the process of law because it is subject to judicial intervention.
Absolutely.
So
Mr. Rudy, in specific answer to my question, why didn't you sack her rather than transfer her to Mizoram? You're saying to me you needed more time. To have done it then would have been hasty. You needed more time to establish the case. Isn't that what you're saying?
No, yes, because there was a judicial intervention and the government was very conscious in taking a decision, and when this decision was taken, it must have been a considered decision, considered opinion taken by consultation in the process. So how can a government of the day be denied the right to take an action against a governor if they feel so?
Absolutely, and the grounds on which you took that decision, I'll come to in a moment's time, but I want to stick with the broad picture first before I come to the details. And I want to put this to you while we're still on the broad picture, Mr. Ramachandran. It's absolutely clear that Dr. Beniwal had just 2 months before she retired. Why then sack her when if you'd waited 2 months, she'd have anyway disappeared from the scene? Does the fact that she was sacked when she had just 2 months to go create suspicion in your mind about the sacking, or is it an irrelevant fact?
No, I think it's very relevant. But let me say first of all that the government has prepared on file what is virtually a cast iron case.
Well, we'll come to whether it's cast iron or not when we come to the details. You're simply giving away your opinion for now.
It is graceless, it is whimsical, it is arbitrary only for the reason that you first choose to transfer her. She complies with the transfer order, which she need not have. In fact, she clung to office. I say both
the only
sides.
alternative she had was to resign.
Yes, that's right. She should have taken the hint, because a governor holds office at the pleasure of the president, and unlike a government servant, she is not entitled to an inquiry.
So just before we get lost, the point you're making is twofold. One, she should have herself resigned when she was transferred. She therefore clung to office.
That's right.
And the second point you're making is that, and you began with that because she had 2 months more, she should have been allowed to complete her tenure rather than be sacked.
Absolutely. And there I would say that though the government has made a case otherwise on file, it would still be capricious, arbitrary and whimsical, the decision to sack her.
Capricious, arbitrary and whimsical.
That's right.
Aarti Jarat, let me put this to you. The government is letting it be known, and you heard in fact Mr. Vyas make a very strong case on those grounds, that in fact the president agreed and approved of this sacking. He could have sent it back for reconsideration, or he could have sat on it and not signed on the dotted line. He chose to do neither. In fact, he consented and agreed. Does that therefore prove that the president was satisfied that there are good grounds for sacking her and this is not vendetta?
Well, I'd certainly suggest that the president thought the grounds for sacking her were good. But Karan, you know, she had just 2 months to go. And whatever may have been the case, you know, against her, the fact is that she represents a certain institution. It's a constitutional post. And, you know, they could have just let her retire in 2 months and, you know, then pursued whatever charges they wanted to against her. By sacking her, they seem to have been keen to make a political point against Ms. Kamla Beniwal. And I think that political point was motivated, driven by the kind of clashes that Narendra Modi had with her when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat.
Can I interrupt and put this to you? If they do have a genuine case, if they do have a genuine case that merits sacking, then is it not arbitrary, in fact, is it not biased to overlook it and say, well, she's only got 2 months, let her finish? Because then a governor who should be sacked is being allowed to finish her term out of some form of bias. Would that not be an argument that could be made if you allowed her to continue in the event when she should be dismissed because there's a case for dismissing?
Well, you know, 2 months is really, Karan, neither here nor there. And if there is indeed a case against her, they could have pursued the case. In fact, they must pursue the case right now, immediately. I think what is really unfair is that you sack somebody, which suggests, you know, you know, there are a lot of innuendos in this, and after that, all we're getting from the government is leakages of the case against her.
Okay.
I mean, I think they must follow up this sacking immediately with a case and an inquiry, a charge sheet, and so on.
All right.
So that at least, you know, the information is out in the public domain.
Now, in fact, everything hinges on the credibility of the case the government has for sacking Kamla Beniwal. It hasn't been formally made available to the public, but the government has been handing out, and I'm going to hold it up here so that, in fact, the audience can see it, details that have been given to the press surreptitiously and quietly, not officially. It's called a case of Dr. Srimati Kamla, former governor of Mizoram. Jayanaran Vyas, let's then come to some of the details of that case. Now, first, the government claims that the Gujarat government lost 1,216 crore because of the repeated way Kamla Beniwal, as governor of Gujarat, delayed accepting amendments to the Gujarat Lokayukt Act. I put it to you, even if you're right in saying that was the loss, how does that become an offense to dismiss the governor?
I don't think I will agree with that premise, for the simple reason that the Lokayukta was delayed not because of the government of Gujarat, but her predecessor Pandit Naval Kishorji Sharma keeping it pending for consideration for almost 3 years. There are various reasons, and I think on a separate forum we can discuss it. That's not the issue. Let me also tell Karan that what the Congress spokesperson from Gujarat is saying, you know, she might have differences with 2 bills, and these bills are not Narendra Modi's personal decisions. So it's a process. She has cleared so many bills on the other hand. So governor and the chief minister need not see eye to eye on every decision. They might have differences. That not necessarily means that chief minister and governor, their relations are so strained that they are haunted by enmity.
I'm delighted by what you're saying, because I want to put what you're saying for a moment to your colleague. Go ahead, finish what you're saying. Finish what you're saying.
She would have resigned if she had a slight, even iota of moral in 2013, when a court ordered an inquiry against the complaint filed against her under section 202.
Mr. Vyas, just because someone doesn't resign is not grounds for sacking them. When I said to you that one of the grounds for sacking Dr. Beniwal, as made clear in this document which your government is handing out quietly to the press, is that she caused a loss of 1,216 crore to the Gujarat State Exchequer because she delayed amendments, you're saying, and if I've understood you correctly, I'm going to get you to repeat it, that doesn't constitute grounds for forcing or sacking a governor. And I'm very glad to hear that, which is why I want to bring in Mr. Rudy. Mr. Rudy, what you've heard from Mr. Vyas is actually a contradiction of what this document is putting out. This document claims she caused a loss of 1,216 crore because she delayed amendments to the Gujarat Lokayukt Act. And you've just heard Mr. Vyas say, maybe, but that isn't a ground for sacking. That chief ministers and governors can differ. Those differences don't lead to grounds for sacking. Now, how do you defend the sacking? Because that's one of the critical reasons given for sacking.
Well, Mr. Karan, you have very intelligently picked up just one cause. It is one of those several reasons why she has been sacked. She was involved in a land scam which we have not mentioned.
I'll come to it in a moment's time.
Where she claims that she worked as a field worker for 14... Yes, you can... Please just let me complete. Karan, you can't, when you think you have to score a point, you can't just come in. You just give me 2 minutes and then you speak what you want. It's just not in isolation that particular case where she has resulted in a loss to the state exchequer. It's a land scams case where she claims that she was a field worker working 14 to 16 hours a day. Then there is another thing. If you look at the bills and what she has done to the system there, the Gujarat Local Authorities Bill is pending since 2011. The Bombay Provincial Municipal Corporation Amendment Bill was passed after 9 months. The Bombay Inams Kutch Area Abolition Bill was assented after 2 years. Gujarat Private Universities Amendment Bill after 8 months. Gujarat Regularization Unauthorized Development after... She took months and months and even years to clear bill which was good for Gujarat. That she was involved in a Bafna book depot scan where the books which were worth ₹2 was purchased for ₹20. In 1996, Supreme Court judgment said that the reports by the Rajasthan Lokayukt in which concluded that Beniwal and other higher-ups in Rajasthan government blatantly misused their official position to favor few influential in the Jaipur Development Authority. Now, it is not one case. She has used her position in Gujarat to act politically out of vendetta or whatever reason, and the government has not 1 or 2 reasons. Government has enough reasons, but the only kindness which government extended was they waited because after the Supreme Court judgment, there is a scope for judicial intervention, and this decision was based on sound grounds of charges against her, which must have been certified or which must have been said that. So it's not one case.
All right.
And it's very unfortunate. Why do such people who have a background like this still want to stick to power?
But
that's one thing very amusing.
That's a different issue. That's a different issue. Loads of people stick to power, sometimes from your party as well. Let's not confuse people's individual preferences with a case for sacking. The two are different. Mr. Rudy has recited a litany of different reasons for sacking Governor Beniwal. The problem with the litany of reasons is it may look like a lot, but they're only as good as each individual reason. And I'm going to go back to the first reason that I cited because I want to explore that in some detail with you. That is the argument that by deliberately delaying her acceptance of amendments to the Gujarat Lokayukt Act, she caused a loss to the Gujarat Exchequer of 1,216 crore. She may have, but I ask you, it wasn't done deliberately. There are many governors and presidents who hold up legislation because they question its constitutionality. If as a consequence there is some loss, it's neither something that is improper, nor is it a deliberate lapse. It's certainly not a moral impropriety. Does it then become grounds for sacking?
Karan, 2 things. The fact that many governors have done it in the past is no ground for saying it can't be done in this particular case. We have to examine this case on its merits. Now, if you take this reason alone, then it would not stand by itself.
So I'm underlining that this reason on its own doesn't stand.
It would not, in my view. It would not, in my view. But as I said, having analyzed the Supreme Court judgment, and that's why the union government sort of bought time to build up a case, to create a case where they stated reason after reason,
they've said
and the totality of those reasons would withstand judicial review.
I'm interrupting you. The totality of many reasons is only as good as the individual reasons.
No, that's not
the test. If you have 4 bad reasons, you don't add up to a total.
No, I'm sorry, Karan. That's not the judicial test. The judicial test, especially when judicial review is limited, is to look at the totality, not pick out reason by reason.
Well, hang on a second. I'm sorry. I think I'm going to differ with you there. If the totality is a totality of 4 bad reasons, it doesn't amount to much. Therefore, I'm going to stick with this first reason before I come to the others. Let me go to the others. Let me go to other people. Ambi Ben Yagnik, I want to quote from this document. I'm holding it up once again for the audience, which is called The Case of Dr. Srimati Kamla, former governor of Mizoram. And this is what it says. She kept the bill pending for inordinately prolonged periods in spite of the apparent financial losses that was being caused to the state of which she was the executive head. What the government is claiming is that she knew the state was losing money because of her delay. She persisted with that delay, and therefore she knowingly was willing to cause monetary loss to the state. This is very different to the loss being something she didn't intend, something that was not willingly done. If she knowingly knew it was happening, then she intended it to happen. How do you respond to that?
I think this is absolutely a very flimsy and a baseless reason that has been given. How they have quantified this amount and how these acts are put, because these acts which Mr. Rudy has enumerated and the time it has taken in delay do not quantify something. These are acts which bring about some kind of development, and they cannot be quantified in this fashion. That's the first point. The second point which I want to make, this reason is to camouflage the real reason that the state has indulged into corruption of 1,75,000 crores, which she said that if this Lokayukt is not appointed, these scams will go absolutely unprobed. This exposed the Gujarat government, and that is why they have come out with this wonderful reason which does not stand on its own legs.
Can I interrupt? You know, instead of responding to the charge the Gujarat government has made that she knowingly and willingly was pursuing a course of action that was resulting in loss of money, instead of answering that charge, what you're doing is to raise another question, which is she'd asked uncomfortable questions which embarrassed the Gujarat government, thus giving the Gujarat government motive to sack her. But why don't you answer the charge they're making instead? That she knowingly pursued a course of action that resulted in loss of money to the Gujarat government, and therefore she's guilty of causing a loss. Why don't you answer that charge?
No, there cannot be these kind of delay tactics attributed to anyone. There are procedural delays often in these matters, and so just bringing this out because they were pending bills, the assembly has not worked in Gujarat for more than about 12 days per year, and you have to bring everything in toto in order to give a clear picture. You just can't pick and choose whatever you like. So this is something very, very baseless, and the reason does not stand on its own legs.
Let's then come, and I'll start with you, Mr. Jainarayan Vyas, to the second element of the case that your government has made against Kamla Beniwal. And this is what it is, that she was the beneficiary of a cooperative society in Rajasthan which tried wrongly to exchange agricultural land for residential land. And if that had happened, the Rajasthan exchequer would have suffered a loss of 660 crore. And secondly, Kamla Beniwal herself would have become the beneficiary of a plot of 1,516 meters. That's the charge. Do you believe that this is sufficient to sack a governor?
Well, whether I believe it or not, let us first debate whether there is a substance in the statement. The fact is, Karan, in 2013, there was a PIL moved before a court in Jaipur. The court under section 202 ordered an inquiry. The ACP Jaipur found her guilty. In fact, the charge sheet could not be framed and served on her for the simple reason that she was holding a constitutional office and perhaps in all probability was shielded by the government at the center. Now, if this was not the case, you know, the office of the governor is supposed to be with the highest integrity and moral. Now, here is a case of a governor who is adjudged to be guilty in the by the investigating officer, investigation ordered by a court of law, simply because of the technicality that she was holding the constitutional position. This could not have gone further. In her position, somebody else would have gone to the face the music and gone to the jail.
I'll tell you why.
How do we defend this?
I'll tell you. You know, you began by saying, let's come to the substance of this matter. The problem is, there is no substance to this matter. That's why I put the question to you. Because this same document, and I'm holding it up again for the audience, that your government is making available surreptitiously to the press, says the following, and I'm quoting, "The scam to convert agricultural land to develop residential plots, if it had gone through, would have resulted in a loss of 660 crore to the government." The words, "if it had gone through," makes it clear it didn't. So here is an instance of something which, if it had happened, would have been a wrongdoing, but since it hasn't happened, it doesn't become a wrongdoing. Therefore, how does it become a basis for sacking a governor? Your own document says that the wrongdoing never happened.
See, Karan, you have now not any government inquiring into it. It is the court's inquiry which has established the guilt. Only technicality saved her.
I'm sorry, I don't think that's a technicality.
There is absolute substance.
I don't think it's a technicality. I've got a lawyer sitting with me, probably one of the country's best known Supreme Court lawyers. Is it only a technicality to say...
was the SCP did not serve.
Just a moment, let Mr. Ramachandran speak, I'll come back to you. Is it only a technicality to say that the wrongdoing didn't happen because the scam didn't go through? Or is it in fact grounds for arguing that this alleged scam never happened?
Karan, it's not a question of technicality. It's a question of impropriety. And please remember, this is not a criminal trial. We are dealing with the case of a holder of a constitutional office who holds office at the pleasure of the president. And if it is shown, and for this purpose it is enough to show this, that there was an intention to commit an impropriety, that is enough. The fact that the consequence did not result does not matter. If prima facie it can be shown that this was the intention for the holder of a high constitutional office holding office at the pleasure of the president, if this is a reason recorded, that is sufficient in my view.
I'll come quickly to Aarti Jared before I come to Mr. Rudy. Mr. Aarti Jared, as a journalist and as a person who always wants to know the truth, do you believe it is sufficient to establish intent to do wrong, even if at the same time you know the wrong never happened? Does simply the intent to do wrong become sufficient to sack a governor? Because intent, by the way, is always based upon subjective interpretation, and subjective interpretation could be wrong.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, Karan, the point is that obviously a governor has to be someone of unimpeachable integrity, right? But I mean, please, let's look at our past history. We've had all kinds of people holding the high office of governor, and we've, you know, sort of turned a blind eye to the kind of goings on in various Raj Bhavans across the country. I don't think Kamla Beniwal's intent to commit fraud, or if at all there was an intent to commit fraud, is worse than what many other governors have done in the past. So, I mean, I think we must have a proper yardstick.
Except,
you know,
can I interrupt?
Can't make one person...
Can I interrupt? It's not a very convincing argument to say that we've overlooked wrongdoing in earlier governors, therefore we should overlook it in this, because then you'll be overlooking it forever. But I take a bigger point, that intent is not enough.
But Karan, she's not the only one who's involved in that, whatever that land deal is, right? I mean, if she couldn't be prosecuted because she was a governor, what about all the other people who were supposedly beneficiaries of a land scam? Has there been any action against any of them?
I don't have the answer, but again, are you saying that if you can't prosecute everyone, don't prosecute anyone? Because once again, that will be grounds for excusing people.
Obviously, isn't it? I mean, they were all in it together. You can't pick and choose.
Let me bring in at this point Mr. Rudy. Mr. Rudy, what we're talking about is now the Cooperative Society alleged land scam case in Rajasthan. And your own document, and I'm holding it up for the audience once again, which is the document that the government has made quietly available to the press, suggests that there was an intent to have a scam, if I can so phrase it, but that scam never happened. Therefore, the wrongdoing didn't take place, but the intent was there. And the problem with sacking on the basis of intent is that it's subjective interpretation. My interpretation could be different to yours. I would say there's not sufficient grounds. You would say there is. Is it right to sack on the basis of intent?
Well, first point, I understand that some journalists still have not reconciled to the shock that Mr. Modi has become the Prime Minister of this country. We'll wait for a day when they reconcile to the fact and stop defending people who have a suspicion.
Why are you saying that? How did that come up in this conversation?
I'm just giving a reply to Aarti because she came in a mode prior to the elections to oppose what the BJP does, and still she is in that mode, and we'll wait for the day when she reconciles to the fact that... Why not answer my question? Wrong is a wrong. Wrong is a wrong. Now, Mr. Karan Thapar, here is a government which will not answer what you bring, because we have more facts, and I do not know what facts you talk on the television are more correct than the facts of the government. And the government has not given the charge sheet to you.
These are the facts the government is making available.
Papers. Just a second. Just 2 seconds. The best way to ascertain why this government has taken this fact is that judicial clause which the Supreme Court had said that you should go for an appeal. The government of the day, which has been mandated by the people under considered opinion, has thought that the lady in question, the former governess of Gujarat, is under suspicion. Her actions have been a suspect. Her whole performance has been suspect, and a reasoned considered opinion has been taken by the government to sack her. Now, if you want to know the facts, what actually are the grounds, what the AG had to say and what are the grounds, let's go to the court, because nothing what you're talking is in public domain as far as the government is concerned.
No.
What we are talking is there are n number of issues, whether there is a land scam, whether there is a book scam, there is a cooperative scam, her behavior as a person holding a constitutional post and working as an agent of the Congress. All this has contributed for this particular decision.
I hear you.
So if you want me to come back, you are holding an A paper which is also with me, and then say, this is the reason of the government, as if the government came to Mr. Karan Thapar and said, look, we have sacked A, B and C. This is all in public domain.
All right.
There are reasons which have been spoken, and there is a lady governess who at this age, sadly, would still like to hold power.
All right,
and
Mr.
would not
Rudy,
like
you're
to be
repeating
sacked.
yourself.
And
You're
if
repeating
she is
yourself.
sacked,
Please stop.
the independent
You're
observers
repeating
will
yourself,
say
Mr. Rudy.
that now
I want
the
to bring
BJP
other people in.
government has
You're
stopped
repeating
A, B
yourself.
and C.
I'll just point out one thing.
So I am
that a
amazed
female
at Mr. Karan
governor.
Thapar's argument
Take your point.
You
Mr.
are
Rudy,
now discussing a land scam.
Mr. Rudy,
So
you're
come
repeating
back to the
yourself.
land
Now
scam.
Mr. Rudy, you're repeating
My
yourself.
point is
Let someone else come in. It's not fair that you should hog the...
play the host both ways. It
All right.
cannot be possible.
All right.
Mr. Karan Thapar, if you want to play host both ways, it cannot be. At some times, come back to a logical conclusion.
Mr.
Come back to a
the job of an
an
anchor is to ask difficult questions both ways and not to take sides. You
No,
can't
you're not
accuse me
asking
of doing
difficult
something
questions.
wrong
You
when
are
I'm
trying
actually
to
doing
play
what should
host
be my
both the
job.
sides,
But anyway,
which is
this
absolutely ridiculous.
let's not make this.
Your arguments at times are ridiculous.
All right, you have a right to say so.
Oh, tell me how this crime has happened. Oh, tell me how this crime has happened.
Mr.
You
Rudy,
have no evidence.
all right, I want to now bring in someone else. I want to bring in someone else because this is not a debate between you and me.
Let's trust the government and let not those people who have always opposed the government come and talk about the government.
Mr. Rudy, I've heard you. You've made your point very clearly. May I just point out one thing for the sake of the audience, because I think it's important, since many people learn English watching television programs and we don't want to mislead them with bad English, that a female governor is not a governess in the English language. A governess is someone who brings up little children. I'm only pointing it out because there are many people who watch television programs and learn English from you and me, and we shouldn't mislead them. Mr. Vyas, I want to stick for a moment with this argument that the involvement in an alleged scam, even though it's not proven and it's only based on intent, is nonetheless legitimate grounds for dismissing Kamla Beniwal. This is what your government note says. It claims that Kamla Beniwal directly participated in the meetings of the Executive Committee of the Cooperative Society whilst being governor, and this, the note says, was wrong. It also says that she made several visits to Rajasthan, which the document claims, and I'm quoting, seems to suggest her interest in the affairs of the cooperative society. Now, that's what I mean about interpreting intent as fact and wrongdoing. There's something very subjective about it. And all these comments, she attended a meeting which she shouldn't have because it's wrong for a governor to attend a meeting. Her visits suggest that she's participating. That's very interpretive. It's very subjective. Should you dismiss a governor on those grounds, particularly when in 2 months she'd have retired anyway?
Well, Karan, let us not get into whether she was due to retire or otherwise. Let us also forget about all this discussion that has gone on for this long time. Understand one thing, that exact case that was put up before the Honorable President for consideration is exactly not in the public domain. Let us also understand that this is a Modi government decision till it remains the decision of the Council of Ministers. The moment it goes to the President of India, there is a scrutiny applied to it, and it is not uncommon that if the President of India is not convinced about the grounds for which he is agreeing with certain action or otherwise, he would have returned this file. The fact that the President has endorsed this file indicates that the reasons were valid, the grounds were valid, and there were proper justifications to warrant her dismissal. So I don't think that any further discussion on this would bring any results, because none of us are privy to what was placed before the President of India, and relying upon what he has taken this decision.
Ambiben Yagnik, that is, I have to admit, a clinching answer from Mr. Vyas. And I'll give you two reasons why it is hard to refute. The President had the right to send back the request to sack the governor. He didn't. The President had the right to sit on it without signing it. He didn't. And you know and I know that although the President is absolutely impartial, but he is a former congressman. And I assume that a former congressman would have been scrupulous about ensuring that the case against another congressperson is totally watertight before he signs the line to dismiss her. How do you respond to that?
We don't know as yet what were the reasons put by the government. As you just very lucidly put, that the President has just to scrutinize and put his signature, and you have given this attribute that he was a congressman. Well, let's forget about all that, because once a president becomes a president, we don't have to give this color like the BJP spokesperson just gives, you know, every time he brings the Congress in the
don't
picture.
Become polemical.
So whatever the reasons, the President has just put the signature on what the Council of Ministers gave to the President.
That
is one point.
Don't say just put his signature.
Second point
he could have refused to do so and asked for reconsideration.
No, the second point, all this was available when the transfer took place to Mizoram. Why did the government not do it at that point of time? So there is a very,
well, you
very
heard General Vyas's answer. He said the government needed more time. And Mr. Rudy said the same thing as well. The government needed more time. They needed time to build up a case.
Everything was available to this government. Everything was available to this government when it was in Gujarat. And the Gujarat government has boasted all the time of transparency and taking bold decisions. Why it did not do when the time came, and why did he transfer the governor to Mizoram? So there is a vengeance factor, and I think that is the factor which is being hidden by all these reasons which are still not in the public domain.
All right. I want to put that question to you before I take a break. Do you believe it's clinching that at the end of the day the President signed it, didn't ask for reconsideration, didn't sit on it, and knowing that he's a former congressman, I assume he'd have been scrupulous in ensuring the case is watertight? Does his willingness to sign almost speedily suggest that the case against her is good?
Clinching or not, it's very, very significant. It's not just that the President is a former congressman. Remember, the present President is a constitutional scholar. His principles are sound, and he is aware of the requirements of the law. You can assume that he studied the Supreme Court judgment and he has been satisfied that the requirements of law have been met.